Thanks everyone for joining for August, the third monthly Matt's Chats, where I like to bring together three experts, one representing a 3PL, one representing a brand, and one representing a sort of broadly a logistics tech company. So really excited for three gentlemen we have on this month's session. We'll kind of get started by allowing Alex, Nima, and Mike to introduce themselves. And then, we have a couple sort of topics or questions to dig into. I think de minimis is on everyone's mind, so maybe we'll chat a little bit about that and kind of understand how it's impacting each of your businesses and generally, and then maybe a question or two for each of the panelists directly, and then we definitely want to leave a few minutes at the end for a Q&A. So I think all the attendees should be able to post questions in the Q&A function. It's kind of should be on the bottom of your screen there. You'll see Q&A. Feel free to pop in questions. Maybe we'll kind of answer them in real time. With a few minutes at the end, we should be able to get to some of them. I will also post each of their LinkedIn profiles in the chat at some point, so you'll be able to connect with them directly. But without further ado, let's get started. So maybe we'll just, as I said, do some quick intros, kind of who you are, the companies you represent, maybe brief background. Maybe we'll go with Mike, Nima, and then Alex. So Mike, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Appreciate you having me on. So my name is Mike McGee. I'm the director of operations and stores at Mugsy. At Mugsy, we make damn comfortable and insanely good looking jeans and clothes, as Matt will tell you. We sent Matt a box and he's loving his jeans, but we're growing e-commerce brand that now has a budding stores division. So outside of the day-to-day operations that I focus on with the online business, I also run our 7 stores and build out those stores. Currently sitting in our Charleston store, but we've got 2 in Chicago, Boston, Austin, Texas, Charleston, Mall of America, and Columbus, Ohio. All of those kind of strategically placed based on some opportunities we've had. But it's a fun time right now between the supply chain, lots of inventory coming in the door at our warehouse, figuring out what channels are scaling best and most efficiently, and a lot of the ups and downs of the supply chain right now. It's been fun to be a brand fighting for dollars with customers and then figuring out how to make our supply chain efficient through technology and good people.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
I guess I'll go next. I'm the co-founder and chief email officer at Rivora. We are an AI platform specifically for helping both brands and 3PLs to find margin with the multitude of factors that are constantly changing and the dynamic nature of both businesses. Being able to not just look back, but also model out what things could look like in the future is becoming more and more paramount. So my co-founder, he previously was the co-founder and CEO of a company called Whiplash, one of the first modern warehouse management systems and 3PLs. Now that division is called Rider E-commerce, and I spent some time prior to this at Shippo as an executive. Both of us have about 20 years in each in commerce and logistics, and super excited to be here.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Yeah, I'll jump in. Alex Kent, I lead partnerships and strategy here at Stored. I've been with Stored for over 7 years now. Stored's a 10-year-old warehousing and fulfillment consumer experience, really, company where we're powering the physical aspect of logistics through our fulfillment, warehousing, and transportation networks, consisting of about 15 locations, as well as partnerships in the EU and UK. We also have our own pre and post purchase order platforms, as well as our own warehouse management system. So altogether powering about $10 billion worth of commerce a year. I've been, like I said, I've been with Stored for 7 years. I was the first go-to-market hire back when it was a team of 4 of us. So we've expanded rapidly over my tenure here and continue to grow to this day. So excited for the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I like to disclose when I have an interest in certain businesses. I actually do not have a financial interest in any of these three businesses. I just have friendship interest. Alex and Nima and Mike are all good friends of mine, and as Mike said earlier, huge fan of their jeans. Truly, they're awesome. If I don't know, Mike, do you make women's jeans or is it just men's?
No, operationally, logistically, I don't want to make women's. Not because I don't want to support them, but it's just there's lots of sizes and returns, and it's a different model, I would say. But it is the number one question we get asked, whether we're in stores. I just had a part-timer do an exit interview, and they were like, "We need to make women's because everybody asks, is this a men's store or is this a women's store? Where can I get women's?" And my wife also kind of screams at me, but I will say that the impetus of the brand was from our founder's wife's jeggings that then inspired him to make a form of jeggings for men. They're not that close to the body, but the material itself has a similar feel to something that's super stretchy, comfortable. You can sleep in them, sweatpant-like material. So women's is always asked about, but right now we feel like lots of guys that don't know Mugsy yet, so we're trying to get that.
They're truly awesome. I was on a 4-hour Southwest flight earlier in the week, which you all know is miserable for many reasons. And I was wearing my Mugsy jeans, and it was made it a lot more comfortable eating those Maui onion pretzels.
Yeah.
So yeah, huge fan of Mugsy. I'm sure if you hit him up on LinkedIn after he might be able to give you a discount code, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Possibly now or in the future, or wait for a sale. Yeah, Nima and I have gone back many years, back to his Shippo days, as he mentioned, and Alex and I have known each other for a number of years as well with all the work that he's doing at Stored. So three really great businesses. So really excited to dig into some questions. And Jennifer, to answer your comment in the chat, you are right. I'm at the New York. So I'm tired. I'm in Vegas. I've been up since 4 a.m. local time. I reek of cigarettes, not because I smoke cigarettes, because I'm in Vegas. And I'm excited to, after this, go over to the Super Zoo Pet Conference. So thanks everyone for joining. Maybe we'll just kind of dig into or dive into the first question here. So I mentioned earlier, de minimis. I know that's on everyone's mind. Mike, maybe I'm curious to kind of understand your supply chain and understand how kind of de minimis / tariffs have impacted you. Obviously Alex, also kind of posed the question to you as well, given that you support hundreds, if not thousands of e-commerce merchants who have had different or varying degrees of impact as a result of de minimis. So, and then of course Nima, with your business, curious to understand what impact de minimis has played currently. I know you're still a young business, so maybe it hasn't had too much impact, but I don't know, Mike or Alex, if either of you kind of want to kick things off, and we can kind of go from there.
Nima, it's kind of funny you mentioned Whiplash. We partnered with them about 4 years ago when I started, and we were in their Columbus region, and we've been with them now. Ridership is what they're called, Rider e-commerce.
Yes.
They're an awesome partner, and I feel like outside of the de minimis conversation with the tariffs that we are working through, they've just been a great partner to work with. And I think we made some good, the team, not me before I joined, made some good connections and then good bets with Rider Whiplash at the time. We've been able to scale with them and leverage some really cool technology that we had a partnership commercial a couple months ago that showed their fulfillment with us, and it's pretty crazy. They have a lot of robots that go and do all the picking for us, or the transportation movement of the goods, and our team goes and picks and packs, and it's a pretty efficient operation for us at our scale. So
that's very kind of you to say. I'm sure James, my co-founder, that'll warm his heart.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we love them. They're like my favorite partner. The call we have with them is always just like,
Wow,
yep,
wow.
whatever we ask
Amazing.
them to do, they do it. And I think that speaks to Matt, like the current environment of especially e-commerce where there's so many channels that you could dive into, and we've chosen to go more into obviously the e-commerce route and build off of that. That's the lion's share of the business. But then opening up stores has been a way to, broaden that and get closer to customer. We've also launched an Amazon business, and that's been great. But the efficiency of the operation, especially with the person who's going to ship all your product, pick, pack, that's all a big experience driver to get things quickly. Having good partners sets you up for situations like where we are now. Tariffs are coming in, the changing landscape of where we want to source our product. And thankfully, again, good decision by some of the leadership at Mugsy. Back probably about 5 years ago, decided to branch off from one country, the big country, China, that everybody makes out of. We decided to diversify and go into some other countries. So we found some good partners in Egypt as well as Vietnam and Turkey, and unintentionally just built a supply chain around multiple different regions, based on the volume that we have in our biggest products. But also leveraging some really great relationships that our COO brought from his previous experience. And it hasn't been easy. And, for current situations, we got a bunch of inventory that was coming from our vendors overseas that we rushed to get in before the deadline this week. And of course, that deadline has now been pushed out 90 days. So a lot of reacting to try to figure out these costs and where they're going to hit and how much of a margin hit are we going to take. But I feel like, making sure that our supply chain has been diversified and that we have solid partners across the board, Ryder, others, has been very beneficial for us. And some of it's luck because, we weren't thinking about tariffs and the changing landscape there. But I think the leanness of our team and the ability to make decisions fast has helped. And then again, just the fact that we were able to diversify well before any of this happened, has been a blessing.
Yeah, I think for us, Matt, you and I have had this conversation before, but it's a little bit of the same with IMEX changes coming last December, and all of the companies that were shipping maybe Section 321 out of Mexico, looking for new solutions. A lot of those companies had to move quickly. Some of them didn't, and maybe they're feeling that a little bit now with the impending end of de minimis on the 29th. But I think we continue to have a lot of conversations around how stored can help. And I think our core focus is really not on, obviously our core focus is on doing operations well. And Mike, what you mentioned with your experience with Ryder and getting orders out and making sure that the brand is happy. But also focusing on the consumer and, okay, what is that consumer expectation? If you take a look at all the brands and, 60 to $75 billion worth of commerce came through the de minimis program in 2024. If you take a look at that core, they haven't had to necessarily focus on that consumer experience. The consumer is maybe going to their site. It's a great product. They're willing to wait on a delivery time. They're kind of guessing on when it goes. I joke when, I was ordering maybe some jerseys in college and not really worried about when it was going to get there, just waiting for it to be there for the next party, so I could, show that flashy jersey off. But focusing on that consumer experience. So what our team has been working on is really our pre and post purchase platforms of how can we show an estimated delivery date that's powered by AI to ensure that customer is going to get that product there. I was talking to a brand that we worked with the other day of just they haven't had to focus on that. It's a premium dress wear company, and they make women's apparel, and a lot of their customer base here in the States is driven by events, bachelorette parties, birthday parties, weddings, and being able to tell that customer with some degree of certainty, we can get this delivery to you by this, upcoming weekend so that you can have it ready for your event, is super powerful from a cart conversion and customer growth conversion, as well as customer retention. So, focusing on those aspects and really, okay, now's the time. Everyone has to adapt with this end of de minimis and the loophole. Call it what you want. Some people call it a loophole. Some others say, hey, it was legal. But with that ending, I think it's time for some brands to focus on more of the consumer experience and how they're able to take advantage of that.
Mm. I have so many questions for both of you because you both see different sides of the world. But I'll quickly just share, I guess, one thing more broad. I'm in my fourth decade on this planet, so I've seen a few downturns and how certain folks have navigated those downturns, and I've also been fortunate to be a part of divisions and groups where in a past lifetime I was at Groupon. We spun up a division called Groupon Goods, which was practically an Amazon clone. And we went from like 0 to 3 billion in commerce goods overnight because of the scale we had. Or at Shippo, we served, or they still serve, more than 300,000 brands directly globally. I started a brand myself, so Matt knows the whole story. Like, from sourcing fabric from overseas to having it land at the port of LA to a pallet landing in the front of my house. The only more, I guess, at a broad level, the real risk to me as a 40-plus-year-old operator, the real risk isn't the tax. It's actually the whiplash. It's the uncertainty. So, we all know this. Last year, over 1 billion packages came to the US duty-free. Half of that, like, that's nearly half of all inbound e-com in the United States. So it's significant, but the way we can all help each other is just reminding each other that A, this too shall pass. B, how do you position yourself to be more anti-fragile the next time? How do you provide yourself with more optionality? I know that doesn't lean itself towards scale, because if you really want to scale, you take concentrated bets and you say, I'm going all in on China because that's going to reduce my cost of production. But I can tell you, as now a CEO, I don't keep all my money in one bank. It doesn't matter that the bank is secure or whatnot. I still don't keep all my money. So in that same way, I think that the takeaway lesson from, let's call it, the de minimis kerfuffle is, moving forward, how do we all not be so concentrated in one area? Because when the time comes, then we can be more flexible and take an exit route that's available to us. Some of us, like Mike was saying, we've been fortunate enough to have that foresight ahead of time. But sometimes life just happens and you got to take your licks. And in business, not dying is winning. This isn't it's pro sports. In some ways, you have to win to win. And if you tie, you don't win. In business, if you don't die, you won. You get to fight the next day and you get to wake up and go to work. So for those of us that are still here, hopefully the lesson has been, how do we become more anti-fragile? How do we give ourselves more optionality than being concentrated in one area? Because that's the risk. Yeah, so I'll kind of leave it at that.
I agree, Nima. I feel like there's a benefit to being able to take a step back and put your foot off the gas pedal and realize that, like, again, the goal is to survive. It's not to like double, triple, quadruple the business. And you can do that. But what are the systems and processes that you build as you're doing that? Sometimes those don't scale when all of a sudden growth goes from, double, triple digits to flat or negative.
Yes.
And Matt, you talked about background. I used to work at Under Armour. That was the first company that I worked with. Was there for 4.5 years and was kind of bouncing around between IT and supply chain operations. But I saw back in 2017 the chasing double-digit growth, top line, bottom line, starting at 100 million that went all the way up to 3-4 billion. And the goal was to just maintain that 20% top line, bottom line growth. And it eventually led to a very stagnant business. And I love the brand. I mean, I cut my teeth there and I felt like that was really an amazing place to work. But to your point, what is the measure of success that you're looking at? Is it that streak that you just want to continue to hit? And there's an athlete mentality to that.
Mhm.
But when it all falls off because of, the business changing, or in Under Armour's case, the Sports Authority going out of business and having to find a new partner, that really changes things. So I do feel like this is a time where understanding your business model, understanding your supply chain complexities, and making strategic bets that are not just for growth, but how do we sustain that bottom line? How do we make sure that things are efficient? And when you pour gas on the fire, it goes really well, but not just constantly building that fire bigger and bigger until you can't contain it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Nima, before we get any further, I just want to do a quick fact check. I think you're in your 5th decade. I'm not a mathematician, but the zeros, the 10s, the 20s, the 30s, and you're not a day over 40, but
Thank you.
you're set.
Real friends.
Yeah, the 5th decade. So, we like to keep things straight here at Matt's Chats. Um, uh, yeah, so, we've had a couple questions kind of come in, both in the chat here, which I think I don't think the attendees can see that, but the panelists might be able to, as well as in the Q&A. Maybe before we get into these, Nima, I think, well, many of us are familiar with Mike's business, Mugsy. Stored's been around for a decade, so they've created a great brand for themselves. But I think few are familiar with what you're building. And you sort of mentioned earlier that I think you said that you help brands and 3PLs save margin or get margin. What the hell does that mean? Maybe kind of dig, because we do have a handful of brands on this call, as well as 3PLs, and certainly Mike and Alex representing them, respectively. So, yeah, I guess just like, how are you helping, the ecosystem today?
Well, thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about it. This is actually the first, I haven't even announced the company. I suppose on my brother's podcast, this is the first time anyone's hearing about it publicly.
Well, your LinkedIn says that you're a Ferris wheel operator.
It keeps the recruiters away. It's nice. The most embarrassing time was when a real Ferris wheel operator tried to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd never felt like such a fraud. But separate conversation. At a high level, Rivora is the margin layer between your promise to the customer and ultimately your bottom line. In practicality, what we do is we model exact carrier service node strategies to actually, inventory, SKU level, packaging, every factor that goes into your fulfillment operations. Now, again, for a brand and a 3PL, those are two sides of a different coin. For the 3PL, that is their profit center. For the brand, that is almost always their second largest line item on their P&L. And Mike, you can tell me if it's different for you, but that's typically what we've seen. COGS first, fulfillment second. So it's figuring out, how, I guess for the nerds in this room and hopefully the people that are paying attention, how do you not ship zone 7.4? And so often, that goes into the overall strategy of, well, where's my past order history from? Is 50% of my orders, east of the Mississippi and 43% west of the Mississippi? Well, why am I then fulfilling out of Salt Lake or Vegas or California when I ought to be fulfilling out of Aurora, in Mike's case, Columbus, or Queens, New York, right? Like, it just depends where your customers are. But if you're not running that full modeling and all the factors, then you're sort of flying blind. And everyone's core business is something different. My co-founder and I have just been fortunate, and some of it is time. You can't cheat time. We didn't get drunk on a Friday night and come up with the idea. It's both of us spending 20 years, particularly in parcel fulfillment, not LTL, not freight, not ocean, but this very particular idea. And in a world where things are becoming more dynamic, whether it's the carriers providing dynamic pricing. So, for example, UPS no longer does static pricing, they do dynamic pricing with the constant changes just globally, whether it's, tariffs in the US, whether it's some sort of compliance that's happening in Europe or Canada. Change is constant. How do you put yourself in a position? And again, we're not the only solution. There's great people on the return side that are helping folks. Today, we operate on the outbound side. We hope to also expand into inbound and then within the four walls to really help folks model out a full picture of where their cost centers are, where their profit centers are. But I can give you examples from, now we've only been in business, actually, to the date, 3 months. We work with 7 out of the top 50 3PLs in the country and 1 publicly traded brand. And in every single instance, we found anywhere between 20 to 30% margins lying about with an action that's not heavy. And then there's further stuff you can do that's heavier, right? Like maybe change whatever your boxes for your 3rd fastest moving SKU, move 20% of your inventory to this particular location if you have a location, and if you don't, fine. But there's harder changes to make and easier changes, or relatively easier lifts, but the margin opportunity is there for everyone because it's a dynamic environment. So A, are you modeling those scenarios? B, are you monitoring to see how things change? And ultimately auditing your own actions. So we hope that's an area that we can add value.
Yeah, I love that. Congrats. That's 7 of the top 50 in just 3 months, and you're still very much kind of stealthy, I suppose. Alex, I want to kind of go back, excuse me, briefly to the topic of de minimis, and it looks like Lori has also asked a question which is relevant to what I was eager to kind of get your pulse on the market on. Laura's question was essentially she's a brand that produces product in Canada. She now has to pivot because of de minimis. 85% of her customers are in the US, scrambling to use a 3PL here in the US. Obviously stored, is a great option there. So would love for Lori and Alex to connect offline. But yeah, I guess, Alex, since you and Stored have a really good purview of, what's going on in the market. I mean, you have, how many facilities in the US, a dozen-ish?
Yeah, 13 in the US, 2 in Canada.
Yeah. So like, what have you seen in the last, 2 weeks, since, the executive order, came down, sort of, having a line in the sand at the end of this month? I think maybe the 28th or 29th of August, just in a couple of weeks from now. Have you seen a lot of, to use Lori's language, like scrambling around, or are people kind of waiting and seeing? Yeah. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, no, I think for us, we are seeing a lot of international, whether it be Australia, Canadian, EU, UK brands that have a relatively sizable customer base here in the US that want to, obviously domesticate fulfillment and be able to fulfill those orders here. I think our advice is make sure the math makes sense. And make sure that you have a sizable base where it makes sense from a differential of cost standpoint to domesticate that fulfillment. If I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but if there's a certain percentage of your sales that are coming to the US and it's not going to make a relative difference of cost, it probably doesn't make sense now. I think there's a lot of scrambling. I mean, Matt, you and I can joke about this. We all kind of, as 3PLs, take some pride in, oh, this changed. It's going to be really beneficial to our business. Let me go out and attract all this business. And hey, we're here to help. It does come from a place of genuine, like, hey, we actually do want to help. We want to help you through the chaos. We've done this before. We have the experts that can help you walk through it. There's people like Matt Hertz that they do this all the time and help brands find the right partner. I think my advice would be take your time, which is hard because we're now, almost 2 weeks out from this going into effect. But take your time and make sure that you're finding the right partner that you're willing to work with for years to come. Because what you don't want to do is make the mistake of choosing the wrong 3PL and then have to go, find another partner in the next, 3 to 6 months after peak season because orders didn't get out, your consumers' experience was affected. Overall, that's going to drive your sales volume because you're going to get all these bad reviews, and you have to make sure that orders are going to get out and that inventory is accurate so that you can continue to drive the right aspects of your business. So I would say, yeah, reach out to us. We're happy to help here at Stored with all of our locations here in the States, but also people like Matt and Third Person, where you can kind of do a search and come up with and get connected with the right 3PLs too.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Alex. And excuse me, Tyler asked a couple questions, but one of them is kind of relevant here. He asked, do you see any brands keeping some inventory in Canada or Mexico in case the court case challenging Trump, essentially, can it be overturned, right? Is this legal, what Trump is doing? And yeah, what are you seeing brands actually do, sort of boots on the ground?
Yeah, especially with inventory that's already in those locations, they're keeping it there and kind of keeping the necessary quantities in and moving the necessary quantities to the US. You don't want to take a ton of inventory if you are paying cheaper storage in Mexico, and then pay a tariff on it and have this come back and kind of backfire. I think with what we've seen with tariffs, and I am not a geopolitical expert, there is some hesitancy around how this will go. And what actually will happen on the 29th. Matt, you might be closer to that than I am. But I think from a 3PL perspective, we are doing everything we can to partner with the right folks. We just dropped an end of the minimis guide today that can walk you through a step-by-step guideline in partnership with people like Wayflyer, people like Two Boxes, Freight, and a company called Omnifold that focuses on demand planning. So really trying to bring, expert partners together where, we may focus on inbound, inside the four walls, outbound and pre and post purchase, but there are other aspects that you can leverage within this supply chain ecosystem and really the D2C ecosystem to help you get through it. So have a lot of those conversations. Look at all the resources available that you have, whether it be, again, connecting with people like Matt Hertz, or the de minimis guide on Stored's website, and really educating yourself as much as possible.
Yeah, Alex, if you can grab that and put it in the chat, that would be great.
Yeah,
'cause I'm
absolutely.
sure they'd love to see that. And then maybe back to Mike. Tyler, one of Tyler's questions as well was sort of and touching on something that Nima said. The risk of being so concentrated in one supplier overseas. Tyler's question was, does that suggest we should look at diversification in our 3PL partners as well? So yeah, Mike, I mean, I think you use a 3PL. Feel free to share what you're comfortable with. How are you thinking about sort of diversification on that side of the house?
Yeah, we're pretty openly public about our partnership with Ridership. We've done a few spots with them, which was good for us. I think that the thing that worries me about multiple spots of inventory is how do we understand where we have what inventory we have. It's different than making a set of jeans in one country versus another, being able to make sure that they can align the specifications, the fabric, the trims, like that can all be done in the background. But as soon as you add another 3PL, you now have another set of rules, a different customer experience. And I almost feel like, maybe there's a diversification of locations. But I think, to Matt's point, his company, what Alex said, what Nima said, like spending a lot of time to make sure that you have the right partner. I can't take credit for this, but our team did a lot of work prior to moving over to what was Whiplash, now Ryder, to understand the landscape and also see like, okay, what other brands are like us that use Ryder? And we found a good bit of those that are with them. And now they're specializing a lot in e-commerce. Ryder's a huge company that does a lot of different things, but of their engine right now with using these e-commerce based companies, I don't know if I would recommend diversifying there because again, like it's another set of rules. I mean, Alex and Nima both talked about this, but like packaging. So we have packaging at one facility. Being able to have the right amount of packaging, buying that packaging ahead of time and shipping that to multiple spots and then setting up rules. Um, Alex, you talked about this, but like how fast can you ship out of your building? And now if you have two different partners, you're trying to make sure that they're doing it the same way, or otherwise a customer that orders in Texas versus Florida versus California might get a different experience. So I would probably urge against, and I'm speaking from a clothing lens. I'm not speaking from, maybe a supplement lens or, another, CPG type lens. So clothing, a little bit easier to manage than maybe some others.
If I could add to that, Mike, I think what you're saying is so important. Part of it and is at the SKU level, if someone has the velocity and margins, that's one side of it. And then you also have to have the financial wherewithal to do it, to your point. Because keeping inventory in, let's even say just 2 locations, that's cost to you. Again, I'm biased, so please take what I say with a grain of salt. But this is where modeling matters so much. If you know you have a concentration of customers on the East Coast because you sell swimwear, okay, well then you can probably, like, again, you can model it out for particular SKUs. Should I keep more inventory on the East Coast versus the Midwest or South or West? And you won't have that velocity for every SKU. Everyone has their hero SKUs, and that might be 1 for you, that might be 5. So I think doing the math, forget the word modeling, doing the math is what matters. If you don't do the math, you won't know, and you're going on gut. I think gut is very helpful. Shouts to Daniel Kahneman and his ex-partner Amos Tversky. Heuristics are great, but once you have data, so you can layer on heuristics once you've actually looked at the data, and you can make a better informed decisions. You don't have to make a decision solely on the math and the data. As an operator, you have phenomenal instinct about your business, but please look at the data. Like, don't, and again, to Mike's point, if you have partners like Whiplash, or if you have partners like Stored, you have that flexibility to be able to choose different facilities if you have the ability to do it. But you got to do the work. There's no way of getting around doing the work of saying, can I afford this? Is it logical to actually split inventory or split partners? And then on the manufacturing side, it's even way, way harder, like Mike was saying, way, way harder, because you're not going to have a facility in Thailand and then another facility in India that do exactly the same work. So even if the base, like in the case of apparel, fabric's the same, you almost need a central place that does the sewing and just to ensure the QA on the product is correct. That's harder to diversify. It's, again, maybe if you're Gap or Levi's or Zegna or Brunello Cucinelli, you figured it out. But for most of the rest of us who are not those things, that's going to be very, very costly and difficult to do.
Yeah, I mean, and Rob T asked a question which you kind of touched on here, Nima, but his question around like how do you balance strategic diversification, which is time and resource intensive, against the need to stay agile. He kind of referenced that every couple of weeks the rules are changing, right? 2 weeks ago we thought we were good on de minimis until summer of 27, and then oh crap, we got 30 days to figure what out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Mike, how are you, just at a high level here, like how are you thinking about well, maybe I'll kind of phrase it slightly differently, like what is your like horizon of making sort of strategic business decisions, right? Are you thinking 30 days out, 90 days out, 2 or 3 years out? Does it depend?
Yeah, I would say it depends on the day. Yeah, it depends. I think Mugsy has done a great job from a leadership perspective to we talked about it with growth, but also with hiring. We're very strategic about who we hire, and that allows us to wear a lot of hats, and that can be fun in a lot of ways, but it can also be kind of like your hair's on fire when there's a problem at a store, like I'm at Charleston, or there's a massive problem at a factory overseas. So dealing with that has made it hard to consistently, Matt, say where my horizon is. Um, I would say it's probably more within the 6 to 12 month range, just because it's a seasonal cycle, especially in apparel. So, big peak for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, a little bit of a slowdown through the holidays. You get hit with returns after that. Come back up through springtime, and then summer kind of dies off before back to school. So those cycles kind of keep you in this yearly thought process. But when we're thinking about strategic partners, and those are longer term things that we think about, like how do we want to be with our next ridership, for example. How long do we want to be with them? And that's kind of an ongoing contract decision. But that's like, hey, we know what they've been able to do, data, Nima, like you talk about, and then also what other partners do they have that are at a position where we'd like to be. You can kind of see that and be able to project yourself out. But then there's other decisions where, if I'm looking at where's my next store, or what's my new product going to be, those are probably more near term of like, what does the next 60 days look like of sales, and how do we make sure that the launch of the new fall product is as successful as possible, or the new store that we're going to build has enough inventory. Probably not the best answer because it's all over the place, but I do feel like this situation, and even the last few years, we've seen some great years through COVID, and then there's been some crazy years. And I think it's just kept us in a position where like there's no consistency of the horizon. Some days it's what's tomorrow look like. Some days it's like, okay, we can think about the next 5 years. So keeps us nimble, build some different muscles, but I think it keeps you on your toes a little bit there.
Absolutely. Mike, I know you also oversee store operations, so hoping you open a store in Nashville one of these days. And I've got some I've got some friends in high places on the commercial real estate side. So let me
All
know.
right. Yeah,
That's on the docket. Uh, I like getting us out, again with a few minutes to spare before the top of the hour. So I do have one final question. It was actually Bailey's question that she asked earlier in the session here. I'm probably going to direct this to you, Alex. But her question was around like, and particularly relevant for Stored, since Stored has been, in my words, pretty aggressive in kind of acquiring different types of businesses, and you've raised quite a bit of capital, so you're certainly putting that to work. And given where you sit in the organization, Alex, kind of on the strategy side of the house, what are you thinking of, in terms of like, the next couple of years, in terms of like, the 3PL landscape broadly? I know recently you bought a wasn't it? Well, maybe you can share a little bit about that acquisition
Yeah.
you announced a few weeks ago. But yeah, I mean, like, what are some of the areas in sort of supply chain logistics that Stored in particular is pretty excited about?
Yeah, I think, for us, we are always constantly looking at M&A opportunities. And I want to key in on the opportunity word there, because it's not that everything makes sense all the time. We focus a lot on team and culture, and especially when looking at maybe another 3PL of, okay, how is that team? How are we going to incorporate their culture into what we've built here at Stored, and we're super proud of. But also focusing on, okay, if without the core customer base, we don't have customers. So how do we continue to focus every day on our customer obsession? And what that really turns into is the end consumer's customer obsession. So outside of just the kind of 3PL M&A market that's out there right now, and there's a lot of great 3PLs where maybe the founder started it 20 years ago, and the family doesn't want to take it on, and but they run an excellent business, and it's a great operation, and they're looking to get out, and that's part of it. I think the other aspect, obviously, I touched on culture and how do you incorporate someone else's business into yours? How do you make sure that there's no missteps in that kind of acquisition process? What does the technology look like? We have obviously invested in our own warehouse management system. Are there any efficiencies that we gain by implementing our own warehouse management system into some of these buildings? And that even becomes more strategic from a bottom line perspective. And then it's back to focusing on the end consumer. And recently, there was an acquisition we did of a UPS company called Where to Go, that was also based in Atlanta, where we're headquartered. So strategic from that standpoint, but they also have a great team. So bringing them in and bringing a lot of those brands along for the ride is awesome. And we've also invested in what we are now calling Stored Unboxed, which is a kind of post-purchase customer retention. They do custom QR codes and implementing that into our technology to say, hey, Matt, you ordered a pair of Mugsy jeans. You've now ordered 6 months in a row, and you're a VIP customer. Here's a QR code with a discount for you. Go to share it and get even more off of your next order of Mugsy. So looking at it that way, how do you drive more customer retention and customer growth? Because at the end of the day, as a 3PL, without our customers, we're just a building, really.
Yeah, appreciate that, Alex. Well, yeah, I'd love to get wrapped up here so folks on the West Coast can get their day started, and on the East Coast get to lunch. I popped in each of our LinkedIn profiles in the chat here. Certainly feel free to reach out to me if you want a direct intro to any of these folks. But thanks everyone for joining. Thanks Nima, Alex, and Mike for joining as panelists, and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks,
Makes
Matt.
sense.
Thank you
Good
guys.
meeting y'all.